Hi, today we're going to talk about parenting with discipline versus rewards. And I am Carol, and I work for Blomquist Hale in the Orem office. As most of you know, I do several of these workshops, and this will be recorded and put on YouTube later use also. And I will refer to a lot of those YouTube workshops we've done before. And so that's where you find them under Blomquist Hale on the YouTube channel. So getting started with this, it's going to go a little deeper than you probably imagined. So I went a little deeper than I thought I was going to in the discipline and the rewards part. We're going to talk about dopamine a little bit too. But if you don't know about our benefit, of course, here's some basic information about it. We do family, online counseling, couples therapy, anything that has to do with the family, individual, also we have educational classes, teach the anxiety program here. And so there's lots of benefits to Blomquist Hale, and if you need more information on that, you can call, make an appointment with anyone in your household having the benefit. So let's review what we're going to review. So differences between discipline and rewards. We're going to talk about dopamine and the reward system in the brain. How to improve motivation through delay and rewards. And so I have my own handout on that and how that looks that I've used for several years in getting to the word motivation, and then how rewards can encourage your child to have good behavior or not. So it depends. And we're going to go over that and the issues with different things there. The reward system can go away with addiction and depression. We have to realize what's really going on, traumas that are going on, lots of changes, disturbances in routine. So it's really difficult to really nail down a reward system and how it works, but we're going to do our best in that. And parenting styles, we kind of need to know what our parenting style is and why that makes a difference in the reward system, and then steps to emotional coaching and understanding. As I already have emotional coaching on our YouTube channel, so you can check that out if you want to get deeper into that, which we're going to talk about. Okay, so let's define some things. So how do we define discipline? Well, this is the definition of training people to obey rules or codes by using punishment and to correct their disobedience. So we have to define training and we have to define disobedience in this. Okay, so just look at those two words. In disciplining something and training something to obey rules, well, what are your rules and what is disobedience to you? So that's the general term, but what is disobedience to your values, your home, your classroom, anything in that era? And so it's different than what disobedience was to a different generation. And I'll talk about that a little bit. The next slide about punishment, right? So self-discipline, we have to kind of talk about that because that's part of the getting to motivation is self-discipline. So the ability to make yourself do something that you should, don't love the word so could do even when you don't want to. Well, let's change that to could. But what is it that I have to do that I don't want to do? And can I do it? And that's just self-discipline. You take control of your own behavior, you track it, you have willpower, you focus on what you want to do in actually achieving something. So this discipline part continued. So I wrote a paper about punishment versus discipline back in, I think it was undergrad, and it was a lot of statistical stuff about schools and how we've changed things. Or so here's school corporal punishment that, of course, is currently legal in 19 states still, and this was a 2016 study. So just a little bit of thought here, like what's happened from the 70s to the 80s and the 90s. Things really shifted with you can't paddle in school anymore. Well, 19 states, 2016 still said, yeah, we can still do that. A lot of states also put that in place for public schools, and you can find this article about that on this reference. But what we were still using corporal punishment in schools, but what this study found was the children's misbehavior didn't really change with corporal punishment. The ones that did it and the ones that didn't, we have found, if you really study it, that kids' behavior doesn't change. Their misbehavior doesn't change compared to the ones that didn't get corporal punishment or the ones that did. So, and we're going to go right into this book. So that was discipline and rewards, right? So we're going to go into the differences between those two, but we're going to go into why we would do beyond consequences. Heather Forbes, why we would go beyond consequences, why we would do love and logic's parenting, why we would even have a reward system, and are we going to burn out the dopamine in a child's brain if we continuously reward and praise, and then it just won't be applicable to them anymore. They won't have the desire to go into doing the behavior again because they were rewarded, because it's like kind of, we burn out those reward system. We're going to go into these 4 principles. Now, this is a book based on a little bit of approach of helping disattached, insecure attached children, but it really can go into anybody. And, some kids, especially with the stress of the last year and a half or so, have had attachment issues, a lot more insecurities, a lot more anxious behaviors, separation anxiety, we call it, but it's more than that. So this is the key principles that we need to understand. And I just love the hierarchy. So here's the hierarchy of learning. I use Maslow's hierarchy all the time of physiological needs and safety and relationships, and self-esteem. And then here's the learning. So this is so interesting to me and so important to understand. So all negative behavior is fear-based. So fight, flight, or freeze. When the child is in the back of the brain, which you've heard me say all the time, you can't reason, you don't observe the present. Time is gone. Organizing thoughts is gone. Repair is gone. Learning something is gone. You can't reason with a child and teach them something when they're in their fear-based brain. So beyond consequence, so you can't give a child a consequence when they're having a meltdown and you don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. So there's 2 primary emotions, love and fear. So fear is the root of anger. So here's fear-based, back of the brain, fight, flight, or freeze. And that's always root issue of a behavior in anger. So it's always fear brain. Okay. So most of these behaviors that kids have that you're trying to crack and you're trying to help them understand that they can't kick their brother, Johnny kicks, their brother, and it's like, you can't kick your brother. So what's the consequence to kicking your brother? Well, it was out of fear brain in the moment, So yes, is there consequences or a reward when he doesn't kick Johnny? Johnny doesn't kick brother. I mean, so there's lots of things to debate here of like, what do we do for a small child and what do we do for an adolescent? But just knowing this, okay, both negative and positive are repetition conditioning. So negative and positive behaviors they can be conditioned. So we want them to go into the more positive behaviors, right? So negative and positive feedback loops. So same thing. So feedback loops are something that is continuous, your neural pathways, right? So beyond the conscious is where these happen, okay? So they're in the unconscious. So we don't do things in the conscious on purpose sometimes. And it's like, well, that's not an excuse for all the bad behavior that kids have in school or kicking their brother, right? But like self-soothing activities are always fear-based. Negative and positive feedback loops exist in the conscious. So it's like, well, where's the unconscious, right? So we can change and add to that. We can add to those loops, or we can change them. So our neural feedback loops can be totally changed. But that's long-term, repetitive habits of regrouping into the positive behavior. And that's what we want to achieve, right? So over here in the hierarchy is this, okay, first we just need water, food, and shelter to get to safety. So if we want to get to safety, we have to have this first, then we go into physical needs and emotional needs, free from bullies, free from harsh punishment. Yeah, so this has to happen right here. And then we have to have relationships, and that's where love and belonging comes in on the hierarchy of Maslow. But this, it's like we have to have teachers, administrative counselors, school, personal, family that have connection. We've got to have connection. And then we can have self-esteem. So if this isn't happening clear down here, if we don't have safety, remember, fear is the opposite of safe. So we never get past this. And then we can have relationships and connect. And then we don't have our self-concept, which isn't in here. Self-concept is how you think everyone from the outside views you too. And so how you think your peers and your teachers and your family, strangers view you as a person. And that's the whole self-concept there. So we want to change those loops if we need to, change or add to them. And working hard's hard, right? So it's like, okay, it is. And we have quite an issue with this at times, because, a lot of parents come into me and say, oh, Johnny's not motivated, and they're just not. And they don't take initiative to do this, this, and this. And they have no concept of what A's and B's mean, they just don't care. And that's what it is. So it's like to develop appropriate behavior response for an external environment, which is parents saying, you've got to change this. Information about motivation rewards need to be combined with strategies and an action plan. And I think it has to be combined with the child. So yes, it's like, and I know everyone's done this with their child of like, okay, here's the strategy plan of 13 years going to school, 9th grade counts. We want you to get good enough grades that you can get into a college or a scholarship. And then by 9th, 10th, 11th, things, change. And now we change our strategy plan, go to plan B if a kid is anxious or depressed or have trauma that happens to them, where they can obtain that goal. But we've got to recalculate that and then have the child involved in that action plan. And that's what this is. So I made this according to The Road Less Traveled, 1973, Scott Peck book, and several other things and books. So this is my 5 R's, which we talked about in other webinars too, in Brainstorm, how to have a successful brain for the school year by Dan Siegel. He is in my top 5 authors. So let's see, routine, of course, we know that routine works on the brain. Autopilot works. Responsibility, having a duty. So just that's Love and Logic. That's the whole book here. So we're going to produce responsible kids by doing some of these techniques. And then reassurance is fear of the unseen and the real, and it's real. So reassurance is really important because it's called validation, right? The fears are real. If there's a monster in the bed, then we're going to get a plastic bat. We're going to go tackle the monster, and the fears are real, but they're unseen. So think about all the fears in the unseen that's happened in this last little while. Kids going to school for the first time in 2nd grade. I mean, I have 1st and 2nd grader teachers that I know and treat, and there's just lots of things going on. And then here's the reward system. After we have self-discipline, after we delay gratification, and we're going to talk about that. But look how many steps it takes to get the motivation. So self-discipline is super difficult, but the first thing we work on always, that I think really is important is that balance, right? And Scott talks about delaying gratification after that. But here's the balance. Physical balance, sleep, exercise, diet is essential. And then we can maybe go into mental, just like the hierarchy. If you don't have the basics, if you don't have sleep, if you don't have water, shelter, you're not going to go up into safety and feel mentally safe and emotionally safe and socially safe. And then we have to have boundaries around that according to our value system of what that looks like for our families, for our jobs, for whatever you're trying to hold your time, energy, money in. And then you have to have a higher purpose than that. So if you're a kiddo and you're saying, okay, I need to be self-disciplined, and I need to have more balance, and then okay, how do I put boundaries around that? So do you see how many steps it takes? And then delaying gratification. So self-control, taking back power, pain before pleasure, and then we get to a reward system. So a reward system, for example, is if I got paid a year in advance for my salary, and I'm in the bank's full, and I don't have to wait 2.5 weeks for my paycheck. I just get to go, and then and wait for nothing. I don't have to wait for a paycheck. And what would you be? Well, would you be a very crappy employee, or would you be in Cancun, or would you be very integrated and have integrity behind closed doors and still be a really good employee? And you have your prepaid salary for you. What kind of employee would you be? And would you have motivation? Would you have your core values there? Yeah, because that's integrity. If you have a core value, you're like, okay, I already got paid. I'm gonna be this kind of employee. And then you'd have to repeat it, and repeat it, and repeat it, and repeat it. That's where the neural loop and the loop happens. The feeding of the loop is what I call it. So think about, go back to reward system. So this is where I teach distractions compared to avoidances. Very important to understand, because the 10-minute distraction is great, very healthy. Up to 2 hours for an adult, 1 hour for kiddos. So it's like, okay, what is 2 hours then? Anything 2 hours plus without a break is an avoidance. Now, does that mean you can't go to, watch a movie for 2 hours plus, or do your Netflix thing? But if we're doing something or work for 8 hours, if you don't take a break and you are continuously working or come home and work and then work without some sort of break in between, it can become an avoidance. And I'm going to talk about how avoidances turn into addictions about the 23rd of November and go into those. So distractions are healthy, avoidances are not. So think about gaming, think about our phones, technology and families. We're alone together, and we're alone together a lot, and we're together alone. We're not connected. And technologies and families is a webinar that I'll do next month. I think it's January, 1st of January. So delaying gratification, go back up. We're going back up to delaying gratification and understanding how do you manage impulses. So we talk about the marshmallow study, and I bring that up because I looked it up again, and it's in the book. And so since that book was written in 1973, there was, and I know a lot of you've heard of the marshmallow study. So if you haven't, kids were given an option. You can have this marshmallow now, or you can wait and have two. And basically, there was several different studies after that. There's a follow-up in 1980. This was like the main one was like 1972, I think. And then the replication of the marshmallow study failed a little bit, but they basically sought self-control, which is on this delaying gratification list, right? Alone can't determine success. It doesn't only determine success. But the thing is, what they continuously found is that delaying gratification, kids had better SAT scores. Their behavior was down and had better positive behavior. They were, a little bit more healthy in their self-control, their management, their success later in life, and so on. So it is what it is. And I'm gonna get blasted out with outside noise for a minute. Blowing leaves. Always fun doing a live webinar. Okay, so then go back up. So see, after we've done back up and started down and back up again. So it's like self-discipline. So in order to have self-discipline, you've got to delay gratification, but to delay gratification, you have discipline. So it is really, really important, but the delaying gratification has to, according to several people and the book Road Less Traveled, it has to be taught by 5. So think about it, right? You teach your kids all the time to delay gratification. Or what have we done lately in the last 10 years, 20 years, where technology engulfed culture? And I mean, come on, we have Amazon. I like my 24 hours, my Prime. We have Walmart. We have all these things that we can get things now. And we have to teach that there's a reward system in waiting, right? Even if it's little things. So we try to do some of that. And especially in Love and Logics, it teaches that same concept. And then there's natural consequences. And to the reward system, I usually teach, here's the reward system. And instead of going into a consequence, it's basically the reward is taken away. So here's the reward system when you get your homework done, when you save up your money and we go and buy this. If you spend your money ahead of time, the reward system is gone. You didn't get your bike. And you're gonna have to save up and do some more work to get the bike. I mean, so it's really, if you think about it, if you take away the reward, the phone, the screen time until the homework is done. So here's the reward, but it is taken away when something isn't done. So we have to turn it around and treat it as a reward. And we're not doing that. We're going into rescuing parenting. We're going into helicopter parenting, sweeping in. We're into permissive parenting. And we've gone from, over here to over here in that way since the 90s, since these two books were written. So Love and Logic and these two books, and there's only a handful of books that I even teach out of for parenting out of the thousands and the hundreds I've read, thousands of books, and there's just lots going on in those, but really take a step back from all of those and say, okay, what are we doing in our parenting styles? Those have not changed, and we have to look at those parenting styles. And I give examples of 3 different types of ineffective parenting styles in the next couple slides. So think about what your reward system is, make sure you're doing it, and find 10-minute distractions for your reward system. So another example of that is like me washing my car. I love washing my car, I love driving. And so it's scheduled, it's a 10-minute distraction. Cleaning something is a reward. Isn't that weird? But it is a break from taking 50 minutes to do this and then 10 minutes a break from your homework or whatever it is. But think about gaming and television watching. Of course, our teenagers and our adolescents, that would be in the other webinar about technology, has increased so much. And those are statistics pre-COVID. We all know what happened with COVID. We were on screens more than ever. Okay. So this is just look at this into the resiliency part that I haven't got over yet. Takes time. 6 stages of change on here is what I'm going to go over with the addiction model next workshop. So so that's a model, 6 stages of change. You can look it up and see what that looks like. But it takes time to stay into action and stay in maintenance with new motivation, new behavior according to your reward system by delaying gratification, by having self-discipline. So there's a huge part of reward system in this. So with that, we have to go over and what dopamine really is in the brain. So reward, something that we value, given in return of an act, or behavior, right? A thing given in recognition of one's service, effort, achievement. Social rewards are a smile, praise, and dopamine, right? When that happens, special pathways in our brain become activated. So what disrupts and hijacks that? These are just a few things, mainly addiction. We know this. Repeated dopamine, which is the addiction. Trauma changes the brain, disrupts that, the fight, flight, or freeze, right? Post-trauma, and depression and stress. So here we got post-trauma that goes into stress response, and then depression. So this little rewards, right? So we're not going to name stores, but I love my stores that give me rewards, right? They keep coming, they keep me coming back. Plus, it feels like a good incentive. It gives me a little dopamine when I do this or do so it's there. But if it's overdone, we're going to talk about repeated dopamine, right? So of course, shopping, right? So we eat it, we drink it, we shop it, watch it, and what's the last one? We do in self-soothing behaviors as adults. We drink it, we smoke it, we eat it, we shop it. I can't remember the last one. So it's like, so there's some things that we do there. Did I say watch it? Yeah, I said watch it. So yeah, there's some adult self-soothing behaviors. So shop it is one of them, right? So if we can get a reward system around shopping to get people to come back, and it's definitely a brain thing. Okay, so with that, talk about shopping. Stuff and praise doesn't work. We want to eliminate as much of that as possible. So it's just given stuff or praise. Praise is you're a good boy when you color in the lines. Oh, you're coloring the dog blue. Okay. Or why in the world are you coloring my dog blue? So the first one's just you're a good boy when you color the lines. So what am I when I don't color the lines? That's the praise part. And then you're coloring the dog blue is just encouragement. Wow, you're coloring the dog blue. You're sitting in their space. You're seeing that they're doing something. And that's a little play therapy. That's what I do. I don't ever correct. So you just encourage, right? And praise. And the last one is shame. Why in the world are you calling that blue? That's weird. So we don't want to do that. But stuff, giving our kids stuff, right? We've all done it. It's kind of a culture thing, you're right. But here's encouragement, appreciation. So I call praise appreciation. I appreciate that you're sitting quietly. It looks like you're being super creative in coloring the dog blue. So it's like, okay. And it's like, oh, where dogs aren't blue. Then you think, well, maybe they are because blues was. So encouragement. So encouragement is the mother for all of the coach and challenge, entice and invite. So entice and invite is two words that a therapist taught me. Is how do you entice and invite your child? That's really all you have. And the other part is coach and challenge in my model of a triangle that I talk about all the time. And it just explains how to coach and challenge. Number one, how to coach and challenge is boundaries. Number one, how do you coach and challenge without boundaries? You don't. But so encouragement that I'm pretty sure you're going to find the right answer. I'm pretty sure that you're going to know what to do about going to college. Encouragement. It's different than just giving stuff. Okay. So let's have a little lesson on dopamine because this has to do with the reward system. Okay. Scientifically and your brain. So there's two main pathways from the bottom of the brain that send dopamine up. Okay. It drives motivation, mindset, mood, craving, mindset. We're going to talk about growth mindset and fixed mindset. Okay. This drives it. It drives your mood, cravings, time perception. So back when I said when a child is throwing a fit and having a tantrum and they don't understand time, that's because the dopamine receptors have been disrupted. Okay. So movement in Parkinson's disease, there's very, very, very low dopamine and they lose movement ability to control movement. So interesting. So behavior, it drives behavior, it drives excitement. Okay. So let's talk about excitement for a minute, baseline peak, because in Brainstorm, I do have that book right behind me. In Dan Siegel's Brainstorm, it is a book written for the teen and the parent. You are taught about dopamine. You are taught about risky behavior in adolescence and why they do it. Well, their brain is pruning, and you can go into my other webinar on this. Their brain is pruning, and they have 3 times higher dopamine than any other time in their life. Adolescents do. And so when the dopamine drops, it's called boredom. I'm bored. I'm bored to death. I've been staring at my screen and my phone for hours on end in one day, and heaven forbid that you take it away. It's like cutting off their arm, and they bleed to death because it's their identity, and we don't know how to be bored. Okay. And I blogged about this a little bit about Brene Brown's comment about how to let your kids be bored. So it's everywhere. Okay. It's everywhere. And how do we be okay with boredom? And then how do we be okay with excitement at a baseline and a peak? So baseline is boredom, and then here's this peak of excitement of dopamine. So everyone has a different baseline, everyone. And I couldn't scientifically explain that to you, of like how that happens, of like why some people have a lower baseline, a little bit higher baseline, why someone's a little bit more dopamine activated. But what happens is the dopamine drops lower than the baseline every time there's a peak. So this is going to be explained in the addiction model. So here's the baseline and here's the peak. And every time it goes to a peak, hits that, when it comes back down, it goes below the baseline. So think about drugs, think about gaming, think about something that we do repetitive. Adolescents drive fast, have unprotected sex, have, drive fast for that dopamine peak. Okay. Same thing with porn. There's this peak that hits. And so you can never reach that peak again because your baseline sometimes goes lower and lower and lower. And you need more of a peak to get there, right? So that's speed, that's cocaine, same thing. So the dopamine molecule is seeking and providing and pleasure. That's what that is. It's for seeking, for providing, and for pleasure. So our reward system has everything tied to the dopamine, and it not only acts as a reward, but it also also plays a role in the encoding of the reward expectations. Okay, I know this is so deep. This is like, it blows me away. Okay, so if it encodes, meaning your neural pathways, it's going to code, right? And it's going to connect that to memories, events, or stimuli, which I put in like, remember, stimuli can be emotion. So memories are always tied to an emotion. So when we're doing trauma-based stuff, we want to undo the memories or the emotion tied to that event. And so we want to release that because there's dopamine that's actually released tied to that emotion and that memory. And if it's traumatic, now what do we have, right? We have post-trauma tied to an event that released dopamine. So dopamine is a cousin to adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands, your stress hormone. So it's either fear or energy. So it's going to give you off energy. It's going to give you fear to send you into your fight or flight. Okay. So there's a connection to that. Okay. Moving on. I know it's super deep. Keep up with me here. Follow me up with this. So following the next part of this is what peaks, for example, what peaks dopamine. Okay. This is so fun. So 1.5 times it will peak the chocolate. Sex, nicotine 2.5, cocaine 2.5, right? This is the part where, so 10 times for Adderall. So anything that is in that category of stimulant. Okay, so those stimulants are one component away from speed, which is close to cocaine, and yeah. So that's what activates dopamine the most. Okay, caffeine, it only peaks it a little bit if it's layered with joy, but it can peak anything that peaks layered with joy can damage the release of dopamine drop. So the dopamine drops. So pain chronic will reduce with dopamine. So yeah, that makes sense. So just think of making sure that you understand that when joy is layered with it, right? So for example, the release of a reward system with joy over and over and over again, it can actually drop the dopamine levels and reduce dopamine because it's just peaked too much, right? So that's why addiction happens. So this is interesting though. Huberman, podcast.com, Huberman.com. You can find that reference in the back. I listened to a dopamine podcast, and this is where he was talking about exercise. It's like exercise peaks dopamine 2 times a baseline, but only if you tell yourself you love it. It did nothing to dopamine the people that had the attitude that they hate it. So if you hate exercise, you're not getting anything. You're not getting as much benefit, and you're not getting a dopamine release. So remember what causes you to be motivated to do it again, to want to do it again. It's a reward system, which is your dopamine. You scientifically, if you want to repeat and be motivated to do something again, you have to have some sort of reward and dopamine in a healthy way. And we're going to talk about that right now. Is if baseline drops even lower with like depression and addiction, and it drops even lower and lower and lower, it's so much harder to get that peak again, right? And so it gets depleted. So burnout spiking, okay? So spiking dopamine, burnout. So during the week, if you're exercising 6 days a week, guess what you've just done? Even if you love it, if you love it, you have burned out your dopamine spike. So he says, don't do it. Take a break in between. Fast from your activities. The best thing we can do is have breaks in between. That's why 1 hour total for gaming or TV for a kiddo, because we have to have a break, because the dopamine is sitting at this peak and burned out and spiking dopamine so high, you cannot ever get to that win again if you're sitting in this for a long time. So when we have a fast or a break, we have to taper, we have to remove it completely, or we have to fast from it. So intermittent fasting, one of the best ways to help your dopamine eating. We have to break, so when we do have a reward, it feels good, but it's not all the time, right? So we're not burned out. So we have to wait, delay of gratification, be self-disciplined to get to the reward. If we're not doing some of that almost every day and every week, having a good fast, then we burn out and spike our dopamine peaks. So that's what the activities, especially the phone, replenish. How to replenish burnout, spiked dopamine, is to fast, taper, or remove. So that's definitely going to be talked about in my, addiction in the brain. Stop chasing it. That's my own little, that's mine right there. Stop chasing. So we think about the adolescent chasing the dopamine. Think about online dating. Think about driving fast. Think about drugs. Think about, friends and that connection that we get dopamine from a smile and that connection, but we're chasing it and we're chasing it, we're chasing it. And we're trying to get our kids to learn back to rewards of like, if you do the dishes, then you can go and do your thing. You can have a break. You can do whatever you want if you do the chores first. But we have to give the reward system in a way that they're not burned out by it. And that's a tough balance. So like, giving, once again, an allowance, right? So if you give your kids an allowance a year in advance, I'm sure they're not going to do their jobs. But as adults, if we get our salary a year in advance, do we have our own integrity to keep that up? Or we're just going to be in Cancun and we change our name and take off, So, no, don't know, don't know what that would look like, because none of us have probably ever had that put in front of us. So this is the brain, and this is where dopamine is centered, right? And the limbic, the system, and here's the brain receptors. And remember, the frontal cortex, the frontal lobes is where we reason and self-talk, and where we can say, oh yeah, I can organize my thoughts, I can have a reward system, right? Because of that dopamine sends it to the frontal lobes. That is your reward system. So a little bit of that. A little, let's see, does not appear to mind. So that just talks a little bit about SSRIs and how that works, whether baseline reward circuits dysfunction in MDD is major depressive disorder, and it predicts antidepressant outcomes. So a little study there. Okay, so we talked about how rewards happen. Here's the rewards that are taken away. Is that a consequence? Is that a natural consequence? Okay, natural consequences are love and logics more often than not. But this is there. If you've ever gone back into this book, I know most of it's very, very well known, and this is a updated copy of it. But a lot of it is just the same. So the upside down V of love, right, of the right dosages of limits and choices for how old the child is. And this is a little bit of the triangle of how that works. So of course, at the bottom here, there's lots of choices for birth and toddlers and elementary. But the thing is there's lots of choices throughout the whole thing. So even more choices in the high school age up to 17, and less limits. So just as many choices, but the limits are less and less as you go up, right? So the older the child gets, there's less limits. There's lots of limits at birth to toddler, lots and lots of limits to keep them safe. They don't know how to keep themselves safe sometimes. So we put lots of choices and limits on them. But here's a few things. This is rules on page 84, I think all of them are on it. But rules for controlling battles, and I'm not about battles. I'm about boundaries. There's no need to have a battle if you have boundaries. So I don't do battles. I teach parents and parenting in why are you battling? What are you battling? Are you battling a value system? Well, then you just have a boundary around that value system. So this is their rules for controlling the battles. You avoid it. Just avoid control of the battles. You avoid it. You win if you're going to have one, and you pick the issues carefully. So that's that saying of like, man, pick your battles. I just say pick your boundaries, and then you don't have to have battles. Can't win battles with control. You just can't. So that's that. And then rules for boundaries. Values are tied to your boundary. So here's your value. Midnight curfew for an early high school student. He's 15, 16 at the most. So 12 o'clock's your value system for your boundary, because you value your sleep, you value your time, you value his safety, and 1 o'clock's curfew for the law. So somewhere between 12 and 1, it's law at 1, an underage adolescent. So okay, so what's your value? What's what does that look like? And then what is the reward when it happens? And what reward is going to be taken away when they are late from their curfew? Now, do you battle at 1 o'clock in the morning when they come home? I have another statement that I call it, I despise it, is never go to bed angry. And with any situation, I don't know where we got that from and what generation we got that from, but I'm opposed to it. and it's called Go to Bed Angry. Just go to bed, right? There's no need to argue with your teenager and battle about the boundaries. Good morning. So make it a win-win, whatever that looks like for you. Provide safety and hold the boundaries. Their job is to push the boundaries. This is Dan's equal because their brain's pruning, and our job is to hold the boundaries. They're going to push boundaries. They're going to come home at 1 o'clock. They're going to need that dopamine rush, and then they're going to realize, wow, that wasn't worth it, or I had natural consequences from that. Okay, moving on. Just got a few more minutes. So the four parenting styles, but the 3 ineffective ways to parent. So these are from Love and Logic's course in Gottman. I have him referenced as how to raise an emotionally intelligent child. So the authoritarian, is that hard, aggressive, high demand. You're gonna battle, right? Once again, why are we battling? That's like, that drill sergeant and disapproving. Okay. So drill sergeant is Love and Logic's term, and disapproving is Gottman's term. So neglectful, dismissive, turbo attack, helicopter parent. So turbo attack, helicopter parent is one that's a helicopter parent, but they don't just helicopter in and rescue the child from the principal. They attack the principal to his integrity. And, oh, how could you do that? My kid wasn't bullying, and then the principal is attacked. So that's turbo attack, So, permissive, lazy, and helicopter is what we're seeing mostly. Because I don't know if we're just burned out, if we're overprotective, if we hover, if we're parenting out of guilt. It's a guilt trip, stuff like that. And they're warm and emotions are okay, but they're in the friend zone. We're friends with our kids, and that's the triangle. The triangle that I constantly talk about. Let's see if I can find it. Wasn't planning on showing it, but so handout queen. This is the triangle, so this is in my boundaries part 1 and 2, but boundaries with toxic people. So what I was talking about is the challenge and coach. How do you challenge and coach? You get out of yourself out of the triangle. You stay in the parental child role. Okay. This is Kapman's triangle. So if you want more on this, you can look up boundaries with toxic people. But this is how we parent, and we can't get into the rescuing role. We have to go into the coaching challenge. But if you want to be a rescuer, that's exactly what permissive and helicopter parents is looking like. And they're in the friend zone. They're not parent-child relation. Okay. So that triangle, that model gets really distorted when we're in the wrong parenting style and then we're in the wrong role. Okay. And that's what I see most. So this is the effective type, the authoritative, the emotional coaching. That's Gottman, and I have a whole PowerPoint on that again, if you want to go into learn how to be an emotional coaching parent. And then the effective parent is just Love and Logic's term. So what this produces is reasonable children, self-identity, self-concept children. They're independent or they're interdependent. Interdependent is a cubby term. So healthy social skills, they have opinions, they're emotionally intelligent. Now remember, if you go to my emotional intelligence workshop, emotional intelligence is more important than emotional IQ. I mean, your regular IQ. Emotional intelligence shows to have produced more successful people in the world. Emotional intelligence, not IQ. So we want them to be emotionally intelligent, and self-discipline, once again, that has to happen to get to motivation, remember? And it's a win-win. So this is what you're going to produce with this kind of parenting. just a little reminder on all that. So these are some handouts as we wrap up here. I mentioned growth mindset. So the key here is if you're going to produce a reward system that is a little bit more internal instead of external, then you have to show growth mindset and growth mindset parenting. So this is mindset, it's just a book, and how to be a growth mindset parent. And these are some statements that you would give your kiddo in any situation, or yourself. Mistakes are okay. You can learn from mistakes. What's plan B? Everything can change. Everything, including your brain. Failure is okay. Failure is temporary. You can do hard things. It's okay. Your best. So seeking to understand in some of this is essential. This is just a handout on how to do that. Steps in emotional intelligence and emotional coaching. That's what this is. Now, step 5 has 5 steps inside of step 5. It's my favorite step. Setting limits and problem solving. Limits have to happen. Limits. Consequences, punishments, you know, I don't know. Since we're not discussing together, we would have had a little bit more of a discussion of how are you finding things that work? Okay, is timeout working? Really, is in lots of statistics it shows that punishment or discipline doesn't correct behavior. So we'll see how this works as we evolve in our culture of changing how we parent. And some of the things that I've heard and what I've talked about is, what else do we have? We can't take away anything besides their phone or their gaming, because we've given that to them as a reward, but we actually haven't given it to them as and this is a non-compliance tip. So of course in Love and Logics they have they're called pearls, and they're all in the back. So they're like 50 pearls of different scenarios in the back of the book. So this one's just one. What do we do with non-compliant kiddos, or when someone's non-compliant in our life? This is just a little handout and some tips on how to get there. So remember, you got to practice and repeat. Pick your issue carefully. Pick your boundaries and just hold the boundaries. Responsibility can be taught, cannot be taught. It must be taught. So that's their internal, their own internal motivation. So, okay, so to recap this, punishment does not produce self-examination. It does not produce self-examination. It mostly produces resentment, okay? The reward system has to be rewarded in the effort, not the A, or the overall effort, and it has to be a growth mindset. So the reward system is in the effort, okay? And then we need to take breaks from that reward system because the dopamine. Know your parenting style, boundaries, not battles. Firm people don't need to yell, and they seldom use frustration and anger as their underlying root emotion when they're firm, when they're assertive. So assertive, firm, that's what that means. So flawless love, okay, love or fear, okay, there's only 2 emotions in Heather Forbes' brain here, in Heather Forbes' book. And fear-based is all of those other emotions. And flawless love, real, true, flawless love parenting drives out fear as light drives out darkness. Okay, that's how it works. And there's lots of steps to motivation. So just know that it's like, wow, this is not easy. And we can change those feedback loops to positive or negative behaviors in the result of that. And that might be long-term therapy. That might be some really good long-term 6 months to a year to get to maintenance, because that's the stages of change model. So yes, there is lots to get to motivation. So do your best. And as parents, this is from Brainstorm, Dan Siegel. We cannot control the people that our adolescents are becoming. Okay? Adolescents are becoming. So think of that. It's really hard to wrap your head around. It's like, no, I parent and I'm gonna control how my kids turn out. This is Viktor Frankl. When we are no longer able to change the situation, then we're challenged to change ourselves. Live as if you were living a second time, as though you had acted wrongly the first time. So that's the repair part. This is John Gottman, also in his research of couples, of so many things. All we have is repair. When we screw up and we have content and we have contention and we have conflict, all we can try to do, especially after that, is repair it and be better. So repairing it is with especially conflict. It's like, you know what, I screwed up. I didn't mean to do this. There's conflict here. How can we do better? And that's also step 5 in the emotional coaching. Okay, so these are some books that I've referenced. HubermanLab.com is down here in his YouTube channels where you can watch those. Brene Brown, Parenting, Love and Logics, we go over everything. Heather Forbes is the Beyond Consequences. She has a great website, lots of resources there. Man's Search for Meaning and an article. Let's see. So Gottman, yeah, Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child, that's the one, and Brainstorm by Siegel, which I've got 5 or 6 books back there, Brain of Siegel, Dan Siegel. And so these are just 3 of them. It talks about how to nurture your development of your child's brain, mindset, and brainstorm. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and let's have a lot more discussion on any other subjects that you want to have a discussion on, and we will talk to you later. Thanks for joining.